2, 1. Come on.
Welcome to Part of the Solution podcast, hosted by me, Natalie Damiano. Join me for a discussion on all things health, wellness, fitness, parenting, and more, all with a healthy dose of humor. Okay, we are back in the podcast studio today with Ed Byrd, and he is the co-founder and co-creator of Creatine Monohydrate. Welcome, Ed. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Good.
Nice to be here.
Good. I'm so happy to be here. So for anybody on the planet who doesn't know what that is, why don't you just give us a little explanation of exactly what it is?
Well, creatine is an amino acid, and it's usually found in red meat. But I think you'd have to eat about 5 pounds of red meat to get 5,000 milligrams of creatine. So back in 1992, my partner and I, Anthony Almada, and we co-founded that company, EAS, Experimental and Applied Sciences. But we were skeptical, and we started to dose test subjects. And what it is, creatine monohydrate, usually in powdered form, it goes into skeletal muscle and increases creatine phosphate. And this allows the muscles to recharge ADP back to ATP. And ATP is the energy molecule. And more energy in muscles, it increases muscle contraction. So that's pretty much what it is.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And what was the intention behind that project, or how did you guys come about it, or what were you trying to originally do with it?
Well, we came across a study in September of 1991 that was published with Roger Harris out in England. Dr. Harris published a study where he put creatine monohydrate into hot tea, fed it to athletes, and it did increase blood levels. And that's all he showed and published. So we looked at that and we thought, I wonder if we dose athletes, it goes from blood into skeletal muscle. And that was our intention.
Gotcha.
Now, originally, and very few people know this, matter of fact, probably just Anthony and I know this, but we originally thought it was going to work for endurance athletes, like runners, right? Mm-hmm. And it turns out the guys up at Nike in Oregon, the top people there, they got their hands on creatine from us, and they were using it, but it increased their body weight a little bit. And so we shifted over to bodybuilders, and the rest is history.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, and that just kind of took fire.
Absolutely. And we, when we first came out with it, there was a company back in Waukegan, Illinois, known as Fansteel, and these two brothers owned it. And they made maybe 500 kilos a year. So our first opening order, I forget, it was like 10,000 kilos. And they were shocked. They go, what are you guys doing? So they were reluctant to sell it to us because we said we're going to provide this for athletes to increase creatine levels in muscle. Mm-hmm. And so finally they relented and they said, okay. About a year afterwards, a German company, they flew into San Francisco and they took Anthony out to dinner. They were supplying the starting materials to Fansteel here in America. So all of a sudden they saw this huge increase in orders of the starting materials. So they found out that Anthony and I had done this. They flew out to see us. And at dinner, one of the guys, I don't remember his name, but he asked me, he goes, how big do you think this thing is going to get, creatine? And I said, well, I mean, if everything goes right, it could go as high as 180,000 kilos per year, which at that time was unheard of. It was incomprehensible, these kind of numbers. So that was 1993. About 2.5 years later, creatine was around 3.5 million kilos.
Wow.
It exploded.
Yeah.
And today, I think it's closer to maybe 4.5 million kilos every single year. And this thing has really gotten bigger because they've now done a lot of research for brain health. Women are now getting into this because back then women didn't want to use it because, they gained maybe a couple of pounds. But now it's really being promoted for women, by women. And there was a woman on, she's a doctor on a podcast, and she was asked, what are the top supplements you recommend for your patients? She said protein and creatine. So it's really catching on.
Yeah, I think it is really big right now, especially with protein in women.
Yeah.
That's a huge online topic. I see it all day, every day.
Yeah.
So let's kind of dig right into that. How would a woman take this without bloating or without gaining weight? Because that's everybody's biggest fear.
Yeah.
That was my experience when I took it. I immediately, over, the course of, let's say, 6 weeks, gained like 5 pounds, I could feel it. Women are very hypersensitive to the way their clothes fit, the way they feel. And so what's the correct way to dose it, male and female, or does size matter? Does age matter? Does weight, all of that?
Well, your body utilizes about 2.5 grams of creatine per day. So for women, I would recommend taking 5,000 milligrams a day, just one dose. Or you could do 2.5 grams twice a day. Mm-hmm. The chewables are actually kind of cool now. And there's a company, I have nothing to do with them, nothing. They would be shocked that I would recommend their name. But I think it's called ZHOU, chewables, ZOU or something like that. And they were analyzed by another company called Now Foods. And Now Foods runs a pretty tight ship. It's a good company.
I think that's what the creatine is that I have.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. You could have 1 or 2 of those a day. So with time, maybe about 2.5 weeks, a woman would slowly build up her creatine levels in her muscle. Her strength will go up, her recovery will improve, and you could work out a little bit harder and maybe longer if you wanted to. And this will start to repartition women. Now, I started to follow the Ozempics and Mounjaros and Victos and all these guys. So I was up at UCSF and I ran into a doctor, and I not to go sideways here, but this is interesting. I've been thinking about this for some time now. But I ran into Umash Masharani, and Umash, I did a study with him on one of my products I developed many years ago for diabetes. And I ran into him down there on the street on Parnassus at UCSF, and I said, what is the latest and greatest in the world of diabetes, right? Drugs. He said, there's this drug. It's injectable. It's called Byetta. And you have to inject it twice a day. And I really, what is Byetta? He said, it's a GLP-1. Really?
Yeah.
And I said, what is it known for? He said, it reduces appetite and improves insulin sensitivity. Oh, wow. So in 2009, I picked up the research. And at that time, it was Victoza now. And I started following it. And in 2010, an incredible study came out in people that were not diabetic, but they were overweight and they had like elevated cholesterol. So they lost, I think, about 8 kilos, almost 17 pounds on average. And 80% of the weight loss was fat mass. And I was like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So in 2014, I started to talk to doctors, these anti-aging type doctors, orthomolecular guys. And I went and saw a guy in Los Gatos, Dr. Miller, and I said, you should be recommending this to your patients for weight loss and also repartitioning. And he said, they lose weight because they become nauseous. And I just went, holy camoli, no. And so he did. He put 4 of his patients on it, and boom, just like that. And in 2014, I wanted to write a book about this, a booklet, and I wanted to promote it. Not the product, because it's owned, by the drug Novo Nordisk.
Yeah.
But we just wanted to educate these doctors. And my old
on
PhD,
the GLP-1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate because now I see TV commercials every single day, these companies, all these companies now. It's just become an explosion. So with that long story, let me just say this. If I was a woman, and let's just say you're 10, 12, 14, whatever, 15 pounds, if you used Ozempic or Mounjaro, if they use that and some creatine, they would repartition.
Okay,
And you look sculpted.
Let's talk about that. And I'm glad that we segued into a GLP-1 because that was definitely one of the questions that a listener reached out about and wanted me to ask is, well, especially hormone replacement drugs, and then specifically if they're taking a GLP-1, can they incorporate creatine monohydrate within their diet? And what does that look like for somebody with my build versus a woman who's maybe 5'11", or, let's talk dosing as well so that people can get a better grasp on how to take it.
I'd still say about 5 grams a day for you or the other woman who's like 5'11", because takes about 2.5 weeks at that dose to slowly build up in muscle, right? Mm-hmm. For guys, what we used to recommend back in the 90s, and it's still today, you take 5,000 milligrams 4 times a day for only 7 days. And your muscles become saturated with creatine. They peak out in creatine levels, and strength is,
Would you call that a loading dose?
Absolutely,
I had a friend ask about that, about could I take a loading dose and see results?
Yeah. And once you load, you only have to take about 5 grams a day to maintain those muscle levels.
Yeah, that's exactly what he said. Is that loading dose and is effective if you take it before the workout. But you're saying for the first 7 days, taking it 4 times a day as a loading dose.
Yeah.
Then how would this person progress after that?
You just take 5,000 milligrams every day to maintain.
Just go to once a day.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so back to the GLP-1, because that's definitely something everybody's interested in. And the creatine, have these drugs been studied side by side? Are there any adverse effects? Is there any reason why somebody wouldn't be a good candidate?
Well, I mean, there's nobody's conducted a study with combining creatine with the GLPs, but I know a lot of people are doing it. I know guys are doing it. They're doing tirzepatide, which is Mounjaro, and they're using creatine. I know for a fact there's definitely some women. There's a particular group. This guy's got his podcast, and he's written a book or something like that on testosterone. Mm-hmm. And I know for a fact, because the guy that just became one of my test subjects yesterday, he was with all these guys in Florida. And so there's women there are just in incredibly good shape, but they're using the GLPs and creatine. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's a great combination. And I was watching the news, and Jillian Michaels, you know who that is?
Yeah.
Right? She said, these drugs are not, I'm like, are you kidding me? These drugs do more than just reduce your appetite. They're very, very impressive for cardiovascular health, and that's the name of the game, because most people get knocked out with your organs that have the 2 highest concentrations of mitochondria is your brain and your heart. Mm-hmm. Also, those 2 organs, they consider those post-mitotic cells. So that's all you've got. In other words, if you cut yourself shaving, those are mitotic cells. They can rejuvenate and they can heal. But your brain, the cells just die. So those organs play a huge role for people that, you get into trouble with those. Yeah. Organs start to malfunction, right? But I think creatine and the GLPs are a very interesting idea. Yeah. I mean, I would just love to be able to conduct a study, get about 20 women and just watch them repartition.
Yeah. And when you say repartition, what do you mean by that?
Increase their lean body mass and reduce the body fat stores.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
And how do you, I think what I've heard in the world of the GLP-1s is that the reason why it's getting a bad rap is because it's kind of a one-size-fits-all, and people are getting overloaded by these injections. So I've really dug into the world of microdosing these GLP-1s, and I've followed doctors and read studies about lower doses, and maybe you're only taking it 3 times a week instead of 5 times a week. And so I really think there's the bad rap that people think, or the adverse effects of it, are because people are overdoing it, because we all think if we take more, it's going to work better. Right. And I think there's something to be said about microdosing it. And even, would you say the same thing is true with creatine, or is that something that's specifically you should be taking this 2.5 or 5 milligrams
or grams
a day?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think so. But the microdosing with the GLPs, that's not been published, you know, so who knows? But at the end of the day, I know this is happening. I think once you hit your target weight, I think that's really interesting to go down to the lower dosages or even Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yeah.
Well, actually, wait a second. If you're going to do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you're not using Ozempic or Mounjaro because those, the half-life of those drugs are about 3 to 4 days. They say a week, but they do that mostly for to keep it simple.
Yeah.
Right?
I think a lot of what I'm hearing is people getting these from compound pharmacies.
Yeah,
and it's
that's
just a
right.
GLP-1 peptide.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're just dosing themselves essentially, or they're working with a practitioner or an alternative practitioner on how to use them and, you know, when's it appropriate.
Right. You know, it's interesting about, you reminded me about the compounding part. There's the third generation. So there's the GLP-1s, and Mounjaro is GLP-1 plus the GIP, right? The third generation is GLP-1, GIP, and glucagon. Now, glucagon will burn up fat. It chews your fat up. I do think it increases your appetite somewhat. And I don't know if you plateau and go back to normal, you may experience initial, but that drug is very interesting. I mean, it's still in clinical development and trials, but if that drug, I know it's out there right now. I know that for a fact. And there's people who lost a lot of weight on this. It's actually called retatrutide.
Yeah, I've heard the word. I think
Holy smokes, yeah.
I've heard it before.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's great if somebody's on a weight loss journey and they need a leg up on the weight loss. I think give people a win first, you know, but I do believe it should be coupled with lifestyle, with diet, you know, with eating right and getting better. I think the problem is, per usual, we just want to be lazy and take a pill instead of doing the hard work.
Yeah. Well, this is definitely happening for sure.
Yeah.
And, you know, the one thing I have to tell you, so what is this now, 2025? I have noticed probably in the last, let's just say a year, but I've seen a lot of women leaned out, right? And at first you're like, oh, yeah, okay. But after a while, I said, I've seen a lot, very high percentage. And I was just down in Beverly Hills, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and I'm just telling you, I think a lot of people are using this stuff.
100%.
It's an explosion.
Yes.
You know, and this is basically the Lipitor, because Lipitor, that one single cholesterol-lowering drug, when Pfizer, it's now a generic and has been for years, but when Pfizer had the patents, they were doing $8 billion a year with one little bottle known as Lipitor. So these drugs, they're going to be astronomical.
Oh, it's going to blow up because people want to look good before they feel good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And you know, dieting, it's kind of like we used to joke. I can't say the name of the company, but kind of like a weight loss places. You know, we used to joke about this at my last company. Just should put a revolving door on those. You know, you go in, you lose the weight, you come out, and you come right back.
Yeah.
6 months, 12 months later.
Yeah.
Because your brain likes what it likes.
Yes.
And if you eat the typical Western, you know, because the United States has pretty much perfected the taste of food, you know, high fat, salt, sugar, and your taste buds, and then your brain gets used to it. As a matter of fact, there was a very interesting study they took with animals. They just fed them sucrose. Then they took away the sucrose, and that part of the brain was still kind of lit up. Because it's like this, just craving the sugar. It's just unbelievable. I mean, the brain fascinates me, and evolutionary biology. So I'm actually glad that I'm not one of these people that are against the GLPs or, you know, the Mounjaro types.
Yeah.
Because I think it's going to do more for the public health than just about anything. Because you've got people just slowly getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, every 2-3 years, their body mass index is expanding. They're developing pre-diabetes, cardiovascular disease. They're getting ready to set themselves up to have a stroke.
Yeah.
And the financial burden on this country because of this is outrageous.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad. I'd love to have a debate with Jillian Michaels. Get me on Fox News with her and have Hannity watch Hannity and Jillian Michaels team up on me. And just
I
chew
would
me
love
up.
to be there with you for that because I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
We are designed to just treat a symptom. There's no,
Right. Yeah.
it's not curative medicine, and it's not going to empower you to do better and have integrity within yourself. So I very much agree with you, and I think that this could be a huge step forward, but I'm sure that will come at a cost. Absolutely. You know, and I think people should. So let's kind of talk a little bit about like the neuroscience or the cognitive, the brain function of the monohydrate or the creatine monohydrate. And what are the other benefits other than just essentially pumping the muscles?
Well, okay, for the brain, your brain consumes an extraordinary amount of energy and oxygen. So your brain weighs about 2% of your body weight, yet it consumes 20% of the food or the calories, the glucose, and also oxygen. Your brain produces about 4.2 trillion bits of ATP per second. Per second. I mean, it's extraordinary, the amount of ATP. Your brain and muscles.
What is ATP?
It's energy. It's the energy adenosine triphosphate. It is the energy molecule that drives everything. And it's like your body pretty much is like electricity.
Yeah.
So these electrons flow down the electron transport chain, and ultimately they produce ATP, right? But your brain, as you get older, especially, and let's just say you're kind of sedentary, you're overeating, the ATP levels slowly decreases, and you start to lose cognition, creativity, insights, focus, work capacity, work productivity. And there's very little reserves or stores of ATP in the brain. So your brain constantly must make it. And as your brain gets older, it becomes more insulin resistant. So therefore, it can't pull glucose in through the glucose transporters into the cell, then ultimately into the mitochondria to produce ATP. So it's like a chain reaction.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
It's aging. It's getting older. Got it.
And also, you're not efficient with producing ATP. So this inefficiency starts to produce these things called reactive oxygen species, which technically is like free radicals.
Okay.
So your free radical levels go up, ATP levels start to decline, and then it becomes a vicious cycle. Now, it doesn't happen in like 2 weeks, but we're talking about years and years and years that accumulates. So creatine goes into your brain, your neurons, and all that stuff. It helps your brain to make ATP. So this is what they are probably going to see in the future, that it could be a supplement that really helps people, their brains age better.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
So essentially, we should start taking it sooner than later as
so.
Preventative almost.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I started to take creatine, and then I stopped, and I've been so busy, and I do have some of those Zao chewables.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I travel, I should just throw them in my suitcase. So I'm going to start back up now that we're doing this podcast.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I'm glad that I've motivated you to now start taking creatine.
Yeah. But as being transparent, I am not taking it right now. Also, I'm not a bodybuilder. I'm more of an athlete. I don't just go to the gym and just lift, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's great. But I really spend a lot of my time reading the scientific journals. There's just no question about it. I really like the science, and I want to know more and more and more, because I'm kind of innovative. And, going back to that drug, retatrutide, the third generation GLP-1, GIP, and glucagon. So I worked at a company called Champion Nutrition in 1986.
Yeah.
Well, Champion Nutrition formula was a protein, carbohydrate, and medium-chain triglycerides, right? So two guys actually started that company. One was Mike Zampano, and the other guy was Dan Duchesne. And those two guys wrote a book called The Underground Steroid Handbook, because they actually had a little office at Gold's Gym in Venice Beach. So this
Where it all started.
Yeah. Mike Zampano, we called him Z. Z moved up to Fairfield in that town, right? And he started this company, Champion Nutrition. Oh, okay. So I don't know what it was. One week, this guy, Dan Duchesne, shows up. And I heard about him, knew his reputation. But we were in the office, and he was sitting in his chair, and he was talking to me about, he thinks glucagon could really help reduce body fat stores in people, bodybuilders, right? I said, really, glucagon? Isn't that amazing? He was telling me this in 1986, and retatrutide, a third of the ingredient in that product is glucagon. Extraordinary. By the way, that company...
which is a peptide. Is that correct?
Which one? Yeah.
The glucagon. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But the... it's so funny, that company ended up becoming... So they took the powder, because we used to sell it in cans, but they put it into a little, milk carton, and it's now called Muscle Milk.
Oh.
That formula was actually developed, I think, in 1984.
I read that in your LinkedIn bio.
Isn't that a weird?
Yeah.
I just tell you, man, my career has been kind of nutty.
Yeah, but that's what makes it so great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, you're probably constantly twisting and turning and learning. You know, you're a brain. You want to keep learning, keep growing, and continue education. So it doesn't surprise me that, you're just on to the next thing, or you're down the rabbit hole on this or that. Yeah,
I wish I could talk about my new project, because I've really been working on this guy for decades. And this is so funny. Because this product it really is a trip.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
But I can't talk about it. It's unfortunate, too, because I know way more about that than I do probably creatine.
Really? Has this something that's always just been in the background for you and that you've been curious about?
Well, what it is, it's kind of odd. I'll develop a product and with not a whole lot of expectations. And like at my last company, there was a product, we called it NO2. And there might be people listening to this that actually go, wait a second, I heard of that product, or I used it. Now, people will confuse it with NO Explode, which was made by these two guys, kids. They were knuckleheads. But the real product was NO2. These were controlled release caplets or tablets, right? And that product exploded in sales at GNC. I gave them an exclusive. And it broke all sales records. We were back ordered for almost 3 years. And the lab that was building it for me, the contract manufacturer, for the first time in the history of this lab, they ran the lab 6 days a week, 24 hours a day to make this product.
What is the product?
Well, it was called NO2. So it's a controlled release arginine alpha ketoglutarate.
Okay, can you explain that in layman's terms?
Well, it's I'm sorry. It's
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So it's an amino acid salt. Mm-hmm. So it's arginine and alpha ketoglutarate, which alpha ketoglutarate plays a significant role in the Krebs cycle, has to do with energy, right?
Yes.
But at the time, I developed this pill in 1997, but I didn't commercialize it until April of 2000. Matter of fact, the first day we actually opened up for business to sell this product was April 15th. And now that I think of it, we were laughing back. Oh, that's great. We introduced the product on tax day.
Yeah.
And everybody's broke.
Yeah. Sales are going to be shit.
Yeah. But that product, it taught me a lot about brain function, because this product played a huge role. And at the time, I didn't know this, with mitochondrial function, a thing called mitochondrial biogenesis. So it activated something in your cells, a protein, which directs the mitochondria to make baby mitochondria. Because when you're 20 years old, you got a ton of these little energy compartments called mitochondria, and you produce a ton of energy. So therefore, when you were 20, you're jumping all over the place. You say, oh, I got an hour and a half. I'm going to go run, 10 miles, and then come back, and then you go to class. It's just outrageous how your body, you just kept going and going and going. That's a ton of mitochondria.
Yeah.
But as you age, especially now at my age, I'm right now, when I was in my 20s, let's just say I had 100% mitochondria, right? Right now, I'm at about 60%.
Yeah.
You could lose up to 40%. But of course, I've been working out and I'm, doing a lot of stuff. So my mitochondrial content probably has gone up a little bit higher. But when you activate this protein, it makes more mitochondria. Even if you're sitting on a couch, okay, because they did this with animals where they upregulated this protein, and these animals became leaner and fitter. They were running longer, faster. So it's very interesting. So mitochondria has really been an area where I've spent I think I really got into mitochondria probably back in 1996 is when I started to really investigate this.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of great scientists out there working on mitochondrial biogenesis and its relationship to aging, its relationship to athletic performance, because that's one of the areas that I think people should focus if they want to age better. So, and again, this is a cocktail that I take, and and I have nothing to do with this. Remember that, in case people think, wait, are you selling this stuff? But no, I'm not.
Yeah.
This is pure knowledge.
Okay.
I would take a supplement called PQQ, 40 to 80 milligrams a day. There's a product that I take, but basically it's an NAD precursor. So I elevate my NAD levels. And then there's another product which we tried to license it back in 2006 because we wanted to put it into a topical cream. And I'm kind of surprised these guys haven't done it. And I think they were trying to develop it as a drug, but it's called MitoQ. So it's a coenzyme Q10, but what these guys did, they hooked a chemical onto it. And it's oh my gosh, I got to get this right. Is it a negative or positive charge? I think it's a positive charge. Mm-hmm. And your mitochondria has a negative charge on the membrane, so it just pulls this CoQ10 form right into the mitochondria. And you only take 20 milligrams a day. So that's kind of like a mitochondrial cocktail that I take. And of course, I take my latest development, which I can't talk about, because that also plays a big role in mitochondrial function.
Gotcha.
And that's how
Yeah, and what is this, the Q10? What is it?
MitoQ.
MitoQ, okay.
Yeah.
What does it do? What is the function?
Yeah, good question. Thank you for being here today, because I would have left that part out.
I got you.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's MitoQ. It's a very potent antioxidant, and that's where you produce a lot of your oxidants is inside the mitochondria. And again, as you age, as I mentioned, you will start to increase more oxidants as you get older. And it's hard to get stuff into the mitochondria to actually reduce some of this, as they call it, oxidative stress. Mm-hmm. So MitoQ is pretty cool, but you can only take so much. You can't take as much. You can't take 100 milligrams every day because you don't want to do that. It can kind of probably interfere with the production of ATP. Kind of bogs it down.
Okay.
So it's a balance, right?
Yeah.
All you need is 20 milligrams. They have clinical studies published on this stuff. It's pretty cool.
And are these supplements or things you would take for life?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just to
every day
stay young, stay healthy.
Yeah,
stay
I think
focused,
so.
Balanced.
Yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing is I think if you stayed on this cocktail, and there's another product out there. I mean, it's called urolithin A, right? That also kind of helps clean up the garbage in your cells, autophagy and mitophagy. So they're like little maids that go in and they kind of sweep up.
Yeah, we all need that.
Yeah. There's another product too that we used to deal with, which is very few people know this, and I mean very few. I don't know how many people you have on your podcast, and now they're going to know. It comes from the island off the coast. It's Malta, mm-hmm. And so they had an extract, and it would, you take it before you go to bed at night, and it would activate these things called heat shock proteins, and they will also clean up the garbage in your cells. And a friend of mine, he builds himself because he's a chemist. So there was a drug in development for improving endothelium function and the relaxation of your arteries. It's a advanced glycation end breaker. So what happens is another thing as you age, your body will start to glycate. So think of it this way. Let's say you have a brand new roast. You get out of the refrigerator and you put it into the oven and you turn the heat up. So what happens is that heat will actually cause the sugars in the meat to cross-link. So that's what happens to people as they age. They become more cross-linked. Their arteries become stiffer.
Break down.
Well, not break down, but just become stiffer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and also your heart, everything, flexibility goes down. So he builds it for his own personal use in about 80 people. Like I'm one of the 80. I used to take it, but I should get back on that also. But at the end of the day, there's just a handful of things that over all the years I've kind of learned what to take. I know people are using metformin, mm-hmm. A lot of people. Well, we came across a study, I think it was in 2005 at my last company, and they were applying metformin. It was an in vitro, so a test tube study basically, and it showed a significant improvement in gene expression, which was anti-aging. So I think a lot of people are using it. They've been looking at it now, because what they found out was diabetics who were injecting insulin had higher rates of cancer versus the people that were using metformin to treat their diabetes, which is an oral pill, right?
Yeah.
And they found what it looks like is when you inject insulin, it's a growth factor. So as you get older, your chances of creating or getting cancer is higher. So if you're injecting a growth factor every day, and these cells become a little abnormal, yes. So that's another thing too that I don't know when that study is going to be completed, but the NIH, I think it has to be like 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah. So
$80 million study for that.
A lot of these are going to benefit us in the long term.
Yeah.
These are going to potentially replace drugs. I guess we're always just learning off history and, what people have done and new studies.
Yeah.
These are just maybe potentially going to replace all of these drugs that are going to cause issues. But like anything, I feel like there could be side effects or other issues, whether it's creatine or, whatever it could be. And maybe this is what it sounds like, is these could replace what we once thought was groundbreaking or new or, the thing to take with these drugs that help brain function and the mitochondria and all of that, which sounds like it's going to be less stress on the body. I mean, if you have to choose, is it better to just take a GLP-1 than stress your body by being overweight and the mental stress of trying to lose weight or, all of that? Like, which is the lesser of it,
I think a lot of people probably have spent a lot of time wanting to lose weight, trying to lose weight, being dissatisfied. I mean, that takes up a lot of brain space. I think that part of your brain or that concern kind of leaves your brain.
Yeah.
So it gives some free space.
Yeah.
So these GLPs, I wish I owned Ozempic, right?
For sure.
Because right now, you and I would be on my private jet doing this interview.
That would be great.
Let's go. Right now, we'd be
over
heading
the
to Europe.
Swiss Alps. I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
No, but these, again, and drugs, all drugs have side effects. You have to try to pick and choose which ones outweigh. You get greater benefits versus
honestly,
the side effects.
Yeah, they all do. I was discussing it this morning with my strength coach, and he was saying that, it has all of these side effects. And I said, but birth control is linked to blood clots and infertility, yet we prescribe it nonstop. So everything has its side effects. You just have to pick what is going to be more beneficial and what you're taking it for,
Right.
I think that's just how it goes. I have another question here from a listener. Let me pull it up really quick. As far as most of my listeners are going to be women, and so they're the ones who want to know exactly how much. And so I know that you spoke on taking the 5 or 2.5 twice a day. Now, is this something that they should take every day forever? Or what if they do gain weight? Should they just adjust as accordingly? Or, how would you treat like, say I was taking it under your direction and I'm like, hey, I just gained 7 pounds and feel fat, or whatever.
Right.
What would we do? How would you?
I would adjust the dose, maybe drop down a notch, maybe go back to 2.5 milligrams a day. And you have to experiment a little bit with it. But I was really surprised, and I just found this out about a month ago that this doctor, and she has, her practice is pretty much, women.
Yeah.
And she said protein and creatine.
Yeah.
So, and there was a store manager at GNC, Darcy, that's her name. So my last public presentation was in 2007. And I'd met Darcy a handful of times because they sold a lot of NO2 at this store in Pleasanton. And Darcy, after the presentation, she comes walking up to me, and she looked incredible. And she was taking my NO2, but she was also taking creatine. And what was the third thing? I know she was staying very hydrated. I think electrolytes. and she looked fantastic. And that's what I believe. Back in the 80s, I worked for a guy named Don Tyson of Tyson and Associates, and Don was ahead of his time. He was pioneering crystalline free-form amino acids, and he had a formula that was high. It was essential amino acids and high in leucine. So this has kind of like become the standard today. But this product was like a kind of a cult product back in, especially down in Los Angeles, because Don's company was in Santa Monica, right? Don Tyson. And that's something else, too, that really isn't readily available. Also, the products today are getting their amino acids from China.
Yeah.
And they clearly are different than the Japanese amino acids. So the Japanese do real fermentation, pretty cool process, not cheap. But the company that Don was getting his amino acids from, and where I used to get my aminos from in the 80s, was a company called Ajinomoto, right? They make the best in the world.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, where should people be buying? Because supplements are unregulated.
Yeah.
And it's the Wild West out there. So where do you think people should be getting these supplements?
I think everybody listening to this show should buy my supplements. No, I'm kidding. I don't have any right now, but I mean, I would love to.
Where would you buy your supplements? Where would you tell me or your daughter to go buy supplements?
It's not just where, it's the companies.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, because most of these companies now are using Chinese material. And these companies are dietary supplement companies. They're not like high-end biotech or pharma. They don't do a lot of analytics. They don't do double checking. Some people do, which I think is pretty cool. But the people that do, it doesn't matter. They really don't know what they're doing. I hate to say that. But at the end of the day, a lot of these companies don't know what they don't know. And like a person today, like an old timer, like, I've been in this business for 20 years. I go, okay, you're new. Because I go way back. And over all these decades, the knowledge has compounded. Like this is so you have a lot of women clients. This is what I would do. And it's unfortunate. I know Ajinomoto is still in business, of course, but I would get essential amino acid, high in leucine, crystalline free-form amino acids supplied by Ajinomoto. And if I was a woman, I'd be taking 4,000 milligrams twice a day. Then I would take 2.5 to 5 grams of creatine every day and moderately increase their protein intake. So I would take probably 1 gram per pound of body weight as a woman. Now, if you threw a GLP, Ozempic, or Mounjaro on top of that, you're done. And then take a multivitamin and then, sleep well, stay hydrated, and that's all you need.
Yeah.
I mean, you could take the mitochondrial cocktail also.
Yeah.
Which I would do, you know what I mean?
For sure.
But that's what I would do.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know this, especially the women don't know this. They just don't know. Like you go to a gym, you always see the guy in the back where it's, the light bulbs are burned down. It's kind of dark back there and he's the gym expert, whatever. But even those guys don't know this because really it's simple, it's clean, and it's effective. And I talked to the company that was taken over, and it still has Don Tyson's name on it, Tyson and Associates. But I think it's Chinese. I know it is. But anyways, I said, does anybody, what movie star is still? He says, well, Don Johnson still gets the stuff from us. So a lot of movie stars used to take this particular Tyson formula called Amino Form. It just sculpts you.
And is there negative side effects to this cocktail?
Probably just your purse or your wallet. That's about it. No, this stuff's clean.
Yeah.
And I just wish honestly, I wish I worked for Ajinomoto and I was like their North American ambassador and I would put that formula together because a lot of women would look leaner and more sculpted on that particular thing.
Yeah.
And it works and it's simple and it's clean.
Yeah. Back to the basics, essentially. These probably are just basic compounds. They're just coupled together.
Yeah.
And it's like this type of product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think H&B is all that effective.
And what if somebody is unhealthy? What if it's a menopause? Like, do any of these factors matter? What if they're on blood thinners? What if they have a bleeding disorder? What if you're pregnant? What if you're taking hormone replacements? Menopause?
Well, if all those are okay, except for the blood thinner, because if you're taking a blood thinner, you've got metabolic problems.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of take it easy. But and then also if you're pregnant, I wouldn't I would just eat nutritious and take the multivitamin for.
And have a creatine baby.
No, yeah.
God, I can't wait to hear about what you've got coming down the pipeline.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty incredible. And think of me when you can spill the tea on that.
Yeah, it's going to be cool.
It sounds interesting, and obviously, you know your shit. You know, you're not just a nobody. Like, you are really in it, very educated.
I'm coming back tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll see you again. We'll do a part 2 for sure.
Yeah.
But I much prefer being on the private jet. So if we could, if we could dial that in.
Let's get the second product going.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's exciting to, I'm starting to put my foot back into the public arena, which is good. Because a lot of people say, what happened to Ed Byrd?
Where did he go?
Yeah, and I intentionally kind of laid low. I've had a lot of companies.
It makes you a target.
I'm a target, no doubt.
For sure.
And I've had people hack into my computers. I know the company.
Yeah.
And another company, it is interesting. They actually set up a fake Ed Byrd on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't even know that. A guy called me from back east. He goes, "Oh, I didn't know you moved to Florida." Oh, I'm not living in Florida. He goes, "Well, your LinkedIn says you moved to Florida." Well, what it is, they didn't have my picture up. They used my name. So people were reaching out to me, and this company was collecting who was reaching out to me.
Yes.
I mean, this industry is insane.
Yeah, the more you know, you're going to be a target, and you seem somebody who could be potentially a little outspoken or willing to call people on their shit.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you want to know the science and the why of everything. At least that's what I'm gaining from this conversation. And you don't seem like the type who's just going to sell a shit product for your own gain, or like, you have integrity with what you do, for sure. Well, I know exactly where you live, so if anybody wants to know.
No, but it is really good being here, and thanks for your compliment too, because I mean, I do read the journals a lot, so my knowledge is extremely broad. I mean, I go all the way from metabolic diseases, aging, epigenetics, the drugs, the pharma.
I would love to have you back and just have another conversation, not even on creatine or a GLP-1, just science. Like, it's very interesting to me. I'm in a 12-week course right now about female hormones and cycles and balancing your blood sugar. And so we're learning a little bit about light and the power of sunlight and all of these. I get lost in the science because she starts breaking down, on a cellular level, what the sunlight is doing to the organs and, all of this stuff. And I won't retain it all, but it's very interesting. Yeah. And I could sit there and listen to you talk all day, because that's curious minds need to know and want to know these things. Thank you so much for people. Thank you for coming on. So for the listeners, do you have an online presence at the moment?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they'd have to contact me directly to get a hold of you. Wonderful. I love being this middleman.
But I wish I had that. I really do. I wish I wish I had that product available for women, not to make money on it, but just to show women, like, look, if you took this amino acid, done correctly, and you took some creatine, and increased your protein, that would be phenomenal.
That's going to be coupled with exercise and lifestyle.
Oh, for sure.
Mindset, all of that would play a huge role, but you'd be a freight train. You would be unstoppable.
Well, the thing is, the GLPs, you will lose muscle.
Yes.
And I have seen women that lose the weight too fast, and they lost a lot of muscle.
Yes.
And one particular woman, I was talking to her, and I said, take it, you just got to stop. Stop the GLPs right now. She lost too much weight, and she lost muscle. Mm-hmm. And she was young. She was only in her early 30s. Mm-hmm. And so, you got to take it easy. Just slowly lose it.
Yeah.
No more than
with
a pound
anything,
and a half.
Slow and steady, not this. Yeah. And I think that's why those drugs maybe get a bad rap, because people are overdoing them because they just want a quick fix.
Right.
As opposed to changing why you're eating that way, or why you don't have an impulse control, or, are you restricting and then binging, or a lot of women, maybe men included, have bad relationship with food, myself included. I've had a bad relationship with food for many years. And it has only been through programs, education, and just the desire to want to change.
Yeah.
to really give a shit about what I'm putting in my body. And I
Right.
feel really good about that because I make great choices. And yeah, I have cake every once in a while or this or that. And, but I don't want to put any of that in my body. Only these wonderful medications or drugs or natural products that can help my performance, because I want to live longer. My father's had 2 heart attacks and a stroke. I don't want that, and he's on every medication you could think of, and that works for him, but not for me. I don't want to get into the healthcare industry.
Right.
I don't want to be a patient. I just want to do it all on my own and be as healthy as I can. So, and I think a lot of the listeners here are on that same path of personal development, but even nutrition science and all of this. So thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you
Great
for
to be
being
here.
Yeah, I hope that we get to do it again.
Oh, for sure.
All right.
We will.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Bye-bye.